want to kind of introduce you guys a little bit to what is involved with making an Epic China episode. And it's not just about Epic China, so if you find history boring, don't worry. This will be just as exciting or boring as it otherwise would have been. 2019, I watched a documentary, and that documentary was about the 100 Years of Humiliation, essentially. And it was very interesting. It was a PBS documentary from the early 1980s. And there's a few things in there that I had never really thought about. And I started to research a bit more. And the more I researched, the more I realized how fascinating this subject was. And that's actually how I got into this. I started to write some just drafts of the major themes, minor themes, and you can see the dates on here. And I just kind of wrote like some basic things that I had found that I thought were interesting. Things about, Japanese goods being burnt during the, 1911 rebellion, and just notes, things I thought was pretty cool. And that was the original draft. Then later I decided I was going to start really writing in different sections. I wanted to have a main track, some notes, production track, detailed track, bonus tracks, and I started to outline the episodes. Now you'll notice that even though the fourth one is the last one out, I already have the next two being worked on. That's how this works. I can't just work on one episode because everything's so tied into each other. Sometimes I'll change the dates as I find reasons that one is, needs to be changed or whatever, but I'll kind of start writing them. If we look at an older one, like this is The Great Evil, the one that I just released, you can see that I'll add my own notes. Sometimes I'll add the sources right in here, and it's not because I don't know my sources. It's because sometimes there'll be like an image or a screenshot or something that I want to add. Like this opium sales already on the rise for decades began to skyrocket further around 1819. This is from a screenshot that I took from a book made by Cambridge University. So I'll add that in there just so that I know to add that into the video. Something that I think is very important to show on the screen. But where do I get all this information? Well, when I'm actually writing and designing the episode, that is coming from my timeline. My timeline is here. I don't think I've ever shown anybody this. So you guys have seen COVID timelines. You've seen maybe even the Cuixiang timeline and other timelines that I've done. Those timelines are nothing. Nothing at all. I get comments like, oh, wow, this is very detailed. That's nothing. Even the biggest COVID, even both COVID timelines put together are nothing at all compared to what I call the Civil War timeline that I have. This is about, I'd say, 20% done, maybe 25. And the reason for that is I don't have all the details of every single war yet, because I haven't gotten to those wars. I just don't have enough time to nail down every single detail of every battle and everything that happened 100 years in advance. So what I do is I start from a skeleton frame. Here's some basic concepts of what happened in China, and then I just add more and more stuff. And as each episode moves forward, I get more, higher and higher resolution into the details. So first I'm going to just scroll from the bottom to the top, and you can kind of see what this is like. So we're not going to go over each thing, obviously. It's all color-coded. This beige is legal changes. Purple has to do with other countries. Red means war. So this red with purple here, this is the Vietnam War. So red is war, purple is foreign. So you can see that that's not directly China, but it is relevant to the story. Different communist states at different times. Then I've got timelines of the leaders of the different versions of the ROC that have existed, of which there are many. You can see I have timelines, basic timelines of everybody that was leading what, where the capitals were. These, obviously, a lot more needs to be filled in. If you see something white, that means that I need to reconfirm it. I found a source that says something, but I'm not sure that that's correct. Green is just a general fact. As I continue to go up, you can see different uneven treaties. You can see the various American presidents in case I need to quickly know who was in charge of what during what time. Things like British Indian famines. You got different secret societies throughout China. The British rulers, because they're also involved, obviously, with the Opium War and other things. Different provinces being changed, their rule being changed. You've got concessions made by China, that sort of the timelines of those. You've got this yellow is basically the actual episode right? So the episode span, you can see that the first one was very, very long, 10,000 years or so, then 200, then 100, then 45-ish. These get updated, obviously, as I go and change things around. Various leadership, rulers of different dynasties and stuff. And this is just the bottom half. This is not even the main part. This is just a little bit. We've got some famines. So if I click a famine, for example, you can see this will be a screenshot from a particular book. This one looks like it will be from a famine-related book. So if I want to find this, then I can just search my computer. Usually what I'll do is, well, I'll get to my sources in a minute, but a lot of these have many sources. Blue is news reports. Then we've got famine and pestilence is this overall group. So we've got natural pestilence. Now, obviously, there was pestilence before this, but I don't really track it all throughout the Ming Dynasty and everything. It's not really beneficial to me. So then we've got sort of a timeline of Christianity, and you can see here by what I mean when I say this not even close to being done, because you've got the Taiping Rebellion here, and there's really nothing. It's just a list of battles, right? So obviously that's going to be totally fleshed out. Korean War, World War I, Edgar Snow timeline, very small for him. General things, orange are rebellions, so this is like pre-Opium War rebellions. And then you've got the Sino-French War. You've got massacres by foreigners, massacres by Chinese. You've got general timelines of opium. And as you can see, when we talk about subjects that I've already covered, they're pretty thoroughly detailed. If I zoom in, this is right around the range of episode 4. So I've got all these edicts against opium and the sources that I, have found those at, and various things. It's very thoroughly fleshed out. Often I'll even put things in here that I don't end up talking about because the episodes are too long. But I'm very, very detailed. Believe me, there's way more. We haven't even gotten started yet. This is still nothing. Then we've got the Opium Wars, a crackdown on opium, which is slightly different than the buildup of opium, obviously. So I've got those separated out. This is all involving the opium trade. I've got different graphs. This is the ratio of silver tail to copper pieces. Then we've got rebellions. So this is the post-Opium War rebellions. Oops, I left this collapsed. Okay, so we've got various rebellions. If any particular incident here happened that I want to expand on, I'll expand to those as I get to the next few episodes. We've got the Boxer Rebellion incidents. Black, in these cases, are massacres or things that are considered to be massacres or things that resulted in a lot of death. This enormous thing is socialism, the buildup of socialism in China, various magazines, people involved, things that most people have never even heard of. A lot of stuff happened in China that represented the buildup of socialist ideas. We've got, this is one example of a timeline of a person. So this is Sun Yat-sen's timeline from when he was born to when he passed away and beyond, because I put his wife and his son within his group because essentially they were well known because of him, right? And most of the stuff that he that they're involved with are sort of descendant of him, right? So within his timeline, I've got his writings and speeches, which of course I will add, more as I get there. And everywhere he's ever been, exactly where he was, when did he go to Malaysia, when was he in Japan, and then what was he doing there, and what uprisings was he involved with, and this is when his brother died, and just everything that I need to know so that I can understand the psychology of this person if I need to write about that. Now, honestly, a lot of this stuff I may not use, right? I mean, does it really matter when his brother died? Don't know. We'll see what opens up as we get closer to talking about him. Then we have fascism in China, which is a very underdeveloped subject because people don't want you to know about it. But I have way more sources and information on this than probably you guys can imagine. I have a lot of sources about this, including the U.S. state, including the precursor to the CIA called the OSS. Everything that they said about fascism in China, led by Chiang Kai-shek, including all those little secret societies and the massacres that they had, and other really, really big bombshells that I'm going to be dropping that is really going to piss a lot of people off. But sorry, about those facts. And so then we've got, Chiang Kai-shek. Obviously, I've got about 1,000 different newspapers calling him a dictator from all over the world. None of my sources, by the way, almost none of my sources are primarily Chinese. In other words, like this, this thing that's calling Chiang Kai-shek a dictator and comparing him to Hitler and Mussolini. Well, who's that? Is that the big bad state media? Oh, it's an Australian newspaper. Okay, New York Times. I'm using very standard sources for the Western consumption, for the Western mind. I think it's very important that Westerners who think about China get their information and see their information in a way that's normal to them. I don't think that telling them, well, a Chinese guy over here in a culture that you don't understand, he said something, so you should believe it. I don't think that's very effective. So I try really hard to stick to English sources that other people can check out. It also helps to destroy people's misconceptions when they want to be angry at you for saying something. So then they go check your source, and then they find out it's exactly what you just said. That really brings down their confidence. And if there's one thing that we know about people who hate China, who have likely never even been here and don't know almost anything about it, one thing that we do know about them is they're very confident. Okay, so we've got various rebellions that happened during the ROC period. Those are differentiated from other types of rebellions for various reasons. We've got, of course, the thing that many people have asked me to cover, which I don't want to sound, conceited or anything, but bordering on an expert in, which is war crimes by Japan during the conflict with China, as well as Russia, by the way. Including, by the way, what you guys call Unit 731, which is actually just one little line on this enormous, very well-sourced thing that I've got. All of this is part of a greater group, which is should be called Japanese conflict or something. Yeah, Japanese conflict. So then I've got that broken up into various provinces, different war crimes and bombings and battles and reports and other information. Guangxi. Some of the provinces were different back then. Some of them were the same, but the romanization was different. And so we have to, try to remember that, okay, Honan, that's Henan, not Hunan, like this type of thing. So I may put little notes for the difference in romanization. On and on and on. This is all just a huge, huge timeline. Whoops, don't zoom out. Then we've got, of course, the civil war that happened between the communists and the fascists, and then we've got the United Fronts and encirclement campaigns, which are obviously not totally filled in. We've got all this stuff, all the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people that Chiang Kai-shek beheaded in the streets and murdered in cold blood, as newspapers were calling him moderate and that kind of stuff. Obviously, a lot about Manchuria, Manchukuo, Dongbei, right? A lot of stuff here. This is Civil War Phase 2. And I'm also very careful not to just say what happened, but I really want to know what people thought about what was happening as well. What did the West think? Like, what did the CIA think? What did Britain think? What did the people in China? How do they feel about things? What did the propaganda say? This is all very interesting to me. And then we've got World War II, which is a very small section. Now, a lot of people think that I would say almost everyone in the world thinks that the China-Japan conflict is part of World War II. In an earlier video, I said it wasn't, and I got some discontent from that. But let me tell you this. I will make the point very clear in Epic China, but basically the point is this. It happened before anybody had considered a world war was happening, right? Their motivations for Japanese military and the Japanese imperialists had nothing at all to do with a world war at all. It was just a war against China. And so to later, 10, 15, 20 years later say, oh, that was all part of World War II, to me really diminishes the severity of what we in the West call the Pacific conflict in general, which was sort of the Pacific War is like a combination of World War II and the Sino-Japanese Second War. To me, these are totally different subjects because the motivations, the timelines, everything is very different. So anyway, World War II, from my point of view, is things that I don't consider to be directly part of the Sino-Japanese war that still involves Japan and China and that kind of stuff. So if I zoom out, you can start to see that this thing is a absolute monster. It is just huge. I can never really share this with anybody because it's just so ginormous. You can never, ever get through it. It's just a monster. And it grows all the time. Anytime that I'm reading a book or a newspaper article or anything, and I find a new fact that I think is interesting, I'll add it to this timeline. Oh, I forgot that's just that time period. I still have all the more modern things, and it just goes on and on and on. This ends somewhere around 1980. I'm not exactly sure when Epic China will end or how long that would take, but I just want you guys to understand that before I actually do an episode, I'm looking through this crazy, amazing timeline that I have painstakingly built. How do I build this timeline? Am I just a magic knowledger? No. Am I skimming Wikipedia like 90% of the so-called YouTube documentaries out there are doing? No. Okay. I have used Wikipedia before. If it's something very, very unimportant and basic, for example, when did, Jimmy Carter become the president? Oh, sure, I'll just use Wikipedia. I don't care, right? But Wikipedia is very, very, very misleading in many of these areas, and it's extremely politicized. If you look up, for example, the White Terror in mainland China, they just removed that and they redirect it now to the Shanghai Massacre. And that's just such a ridiculous thing to do because the White Terror was years and years and years of very well, widely reported incidents of mass murder all across China carried out primarily against communists. And so this is the type of thing where they don't have this standard of being apolitical that they maybe once did. So that's another reason. Another reason is that they just simply don't have many of the facts at all. I'd say about 80% of this timeline is not even present on Wikipedia at all. Like, when did this person do that? What was, happening? What did the CIA say about that at that time? How was it reported? It's almost none of that is there. And the final reason I don't really use Wikipedia for this stuff is that often they'll have facts that are actually wrong. They're not correct at all. And how do I know that they're wrong? Because I can find many, many instances where on Wikipedia it will say, this happened at this date. Okay? Well, let's just say 1835. It happened January 1st, 1835. And then I will be literally reading a book from 1834, published in 1834, and that book will say that it happened in whatever, October. So I know for a fact that the people who wrote that book weren't psychics and accidentally messed up 3 months early, right? This type of thing where it's just totally irrefutably incorrect facts. So it's very, very unreliable. I don't recommend it. So where do I get all this information from? Am I getting beamed propaganda messages from a 5G satellite? No, guys. Here's my directory for Civil War. These with the underscore are just production-related things, like the videos themselves and Premiere projects and stuff. Audio, this was just mainly for effects, music, this type of stuff. Some of it will be included, especially later on, but there's not a lot of audio clips from the 1800s, obviously. Flags, these were made by me. What I did is I downloaded flags from various time periods, and then I used, most of these are SVGs. Most of these I got from actually Wikipedia, but a lot of them I couldn't find in Wikipedia, so I had to find them somewhere else. And then I applied basically an overlay that would change them to look more, gritty and dirty and everything. And that's not because I don't like Portugal in this example. It's because the feel of this documentary, I don't want it to look shiny and new. This is an old, gritty, painful history, and I don't want people to think that this is just all one happy, interesting animated series with, a fun learning experience. I want it to be a serious learning experience because this is a serious subject to me. I've got magazines. Most of the ones that say China, whatever, were grabbed by a script that I make. Some of them were just downloaded manually. So here's an example of a magazine. This is from 1951. This is in English. This is about China in 1951. This is from them. So this is what they are telling the world. This is very interesting and important to me. I want to know how China wanted to be portrayed and how they thought of themselves, and also what did they think of the psyche of the people in the West, because you can also tell that by how they communicate to the West. So that's an example. Signatures, that's just for graphics, really. Pictures, I sort them out in various ways. Some of them are placeholders. For example, here's an image that I won't use because it has this, stock photo stamp on it. But the reason that I have it is because if I'm making the video and I do want to use this image, then I'll put it in there, and then I have ways to get this image. I can buy it if need be, but there's places on the internet that can help you. Now these images are sorted very basically on disk, because I don't really use them in this way. What I really do is I use Adobe Lightroom, and I tag them all. So you can see here I've got Western factories at Guangzhou in 1830. This is a nice picture. The resolution maxes out at about here, right? But I can't really search through photos this way because it's just, there's too many of them, especially as we get into the 1900s. There's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of photos. I mean, these are just the unsorted ones in 1900s, right? There's 7,000 unsorted. I use Lightroom to manage all the tagging, and what that allows me to do is to search by tags, obviously. So on the right here, you've got tags. These are various tags that I have added. Then you can also see some of these have red backgrounds. That means that I used them in an episode. So that tells me, I don't want to keep using the same images again and again. I find that annoying. So that helps me avoid that. All my tags, these are all manually done by me. Everything is, done very painstakingly manually. So if I want to look at 1928 images, I can click here. So this is May 3rd, 1928, when the Japanese were decapitating and brutally murdering Chinese people. If I click on this image, you can see other tags. This is not part of a lot of these things, so it won't have these other tags. So this one just has the date. But if I had more time and some help, this would be more thoroughly tagged to, the name of the incident, etc. If it's high res like this, that's really what I like. If it's low res, I will use AI to enhance the resolution of it. If you go back and watch the first episode of the main track of Epic China, in the intro, there's a guy at a massacre called the Chih-Chung massacre. And there's a picture of him being held down on the ground with chains, and he's looking up at the camera in a very powerful way. The original photo that I had from that was actually quite low resolution. So what I had to do is use some AI to fix it up because it's too pixelated. And so in later versions of the intro, you can actually see that the image quality has been enhanced. I did that with a number of images. Some images I will colorize. Some videos I am colorizing as well as doing a frame rate enhancement using AI, which is a separate process. So if you have animations which are, very like this, you can use AI to find the in-between frames essentially and make it smoother in some cases. So I'm doing a lot of doctoring of images where necessary, but I'm not trying to make them into something that they're not already. You understand what I'm saying? I'm really only doing it if the image is just a great image, but it's just too low res for me, right? I just can't find a high res version, and so I need to improve it so I can use it, that type of thing. So I have many thousands of these images that I deal with manually myself. Videos are, again, hundreds of those. I have 500 in here that are just unsorted, and I've got a bunch that are sorted. Some of them require text descriptions because the description necessary is so long that I can't put it in the file name. And Lightroom kind of sucks at tagging videos, and there's not really a great video tagging software available. I look for any kind of stock footage. I look for any kind of high-res footage, color footage, propaganda footage, anything I can possibly find. And I use these videos not just as a source of video presence in the episodes, but also I watch all of these videos and carefully think about everything that they're saying. Does something need to be added to the timeline, etc.? And really, this is how you do real research when it comes to using videos, is because so much of this stuff is just not well known, or somebody wrote a book about it and it's buried in, some book somewhere. It's just very, very huge amount of work that needs to be done for this kind of thing. So that's videos. I get them from everywhere. I even have a couple of movies in here, but the movies are more just for me to watch personally, to see about how filmmakers thought life was at a certain time period. I do not use movies as sources, so get that out of your head right now. Everything that I use is as well sourced as I can make it. I think that's very, very important for a story like this, is to really get the sources as accurately as you possibly can. So I just have every type of video that I can imagine. Now, text, that's the big one. This is the main source. As you can see, I have 17.9 gigabytes of text. Obviously, those are PDFs and ebooks and stuff, but that's still a lot. I mean, even if I just go into unsorted, it's just, it's endless stuff. So, for example, this is just an unsorted, I don't even know what this is yet. I'm just opening it right now. This is just stuff that I found on the internet. So I can go through it here. Here's various, here's a map, China Information Service made. Different messages and battles going on and policies and how America feels about this and how this organization feels about that and things going on. I read all of this. Every page. I look at every map. I think about everything that these people are saying. And it's again, very painstaking. I've got a lot of different texts from the 1800s. If I look at 1836, I've got the Chinese repository from then. I could scroll down. So this is May 1836 to April 1837 in English. Here's the table of contents. I don't use the table of contents unless I'm coming back to this book. What I do is I zoom in and I read this entire book. And this one is 582 pages. So when I take a bath, I'm reading this. When I'm on an airplane, I'm reading this. When I have time sitting around bored, I'm reading this. This is what I do with all my spare time. I read and I read and I read. And if I find something that I think is very interesting that I want to talk about, like let's say, let me just find something, I don't know. Let's say that I think that this sentence is interesting. Suppose by any chance that Chinese junks were to import into England as a foreign and fashionable luxury, so harmless a thing as arsenic or corrosive sublimate, that after a few years it became a rage, that thousands, that hundreds of thousands used it, and that its use was, in consequence of its bad effects, prohibited. Blah, 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 blah. So this guy is talking about, hey, imagine if China came and sold us a bunch of opium, what would we do about it? Clearly. So if I like this passage and I want to talk about it, I'll zoom to a good distance and I will just literally screenshot this, and then I'll add into the notes or the text that I'm writing, or if it's something sufficient, like this is not sufficient to be added to a timeline. This is just a guy saying something. But if it were something that was sufficiently significant to add to a timeline, this would be a source for the timeline, right? So this is where I get my sources. You want to know where's this story coming from? It's coming from me doing a very unfortunate amount of work that it's bordering on punishing myself, right? I read everything like a psychopath. So now, if it makes you guys feel any better, I am genuinely obsessed with this. As somebody in the chat has just said, I cannot stop myself from doing this. And so the fact that I'm doing these Epic China videos is a great outlet for the information that I'm finding. But even if I wasn't doing that, I would still be doing this research. This is the type of stuff that I am positive that people who tell me about China and how much they understand, they're not doing this. Not at all. They're not doing this. Chinese people don't do this. Chinese historians do this, but an average person doesn't do this. Now, Chinese people know obviously way more about their history than the average Westerner, but even they don't know, probably half of the stuff that I find in these very, very intricately expressed books and accounts from back then. Because why would they? I mean, a normal person who's not a crazy person like me doesn't dig into a voyage round the world and visits to various foreign countries in the United States frigate Columbia, attended by her consort, the sloop of War John Adams, and commanded by Commodore George C. Reed, right? The people don't read this. Well, I do. I read it. I read every single page all the way through. I take those, I add timeline events based on the truth that I find expressed in multiple sources especially, and then interesting things about the way that people thought about those occurrences I add to notes, and then I pull it together into telling the story of that time period from the point of view of what's most interesting to me. I'm making Epic China for me, as I said in my production videos. I'm glad you guys like them too, but I do it for me, honestly. And so I'm talking about what I think is interesting. And it happens to be that most of that stuff almost nobody knows about because it's just so obscure, and there may even be political reasons to try to obfuscate those things. When it comes to the 1900s, everything explodes, and I have just so many sources that I run into this problem now where literally I do not have enough time as a human to get through them all. And so I need to make some decisions about how that's done. And that's where potentially some researchers could come in. But I'm really averse to the idea of having people do research for me. I would much rather have people assist me in research. Now, what does that mean? Well, for example, if I find a book that has a table of natural disasters of the last 50 years, right? Well, what I have to do now is I have to sit there and go through every single one, find the cause, get a source link for it, essentially, make a title for it, put the date range, add them as timeline items. Well, anyone could do that, right? Somebody could help me do that. That's something for the future. Then once I've done all that and recorded everything, then I need to go and find pictures, snippets from the text, videos, which will be coming later when video is invented in our timeline, and edit it all together. I also need to add sound effects and some general effects with the images and everything in the video, so there's not exceptionally boring watching it, that kind of thing. But I just wanted you guys to understand what it is that it means for me to make an episode of Epic China and why it takes a very long time. And it's also because it's not just that I'm working on one episode. I have to work on 2 to 3 episodes at a time so I can understand what's going to be happening. So I know what to talk about now, because that's going to affect something down the line. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes when you look back in history, I would say almost all the time when you look back in history, what they think is significant is not even, it doesn't matter. And then they may casually mention something, and then that's the big thing that happens in the next year that they didn't realize. So you actually have to really look ahead. So I'm always working on multiple episodes at the same time. That's also why it's a lot of work. I have hundreds of books. It's overwhelming. But even though I have all of these texts and sources, occasionally what happens is I'll find somebody in a scientific journal or a book or something, and they'll use a reference, and I'll try to find that original source. And that original source is very hard to find, or it's very obscure, or it's expensive, or it costs money, or whatever it is. I'll add it to a wish list. So I even have wish lists of other things that I have yet to get, and I will get those as the story gets closer to those dates. Now you understand how deranged I am that I actually do all this research myself. And I look at every photo and I try to really confirm, because the other thing that people don't understand is if you're looking at a website and it's telling you that this photo is of this event at that date, that doesn't mean that that's the truth. It actually doesn't. There's many times where you find an image and they say that it's this incident at that time, and then later you will actually find out that that's not really what it is. And so you have to be totally obsessive about this, because the thing that you don't want to do is all this research and then come up with something as a fact, and then later it turns out you're wrong. A smaller, more embarrassing thing is to show the wrong photo or something like that. It's really something you don't want to do. So I try to avoid that. Also, I do not use other people's documentaries as sources, because they're very, very bad, very horrible. I've seen so many documentaries on this stuff on YouTube, and they're just very, very, very bad, unfortunately. I use newspaper archives, anything in English. So Australia, United States, Canada, Britain, and I read what they said in multiple newspapers for each important event. So if something happened in 1932 that's noteworthy, I will literally read every newspaper article I can find about that, every single one, to see what do they agree on. This newspaper said this slightly different. This newspaper, oh, they added in, oh, there was a battle this other day. Oh, nobody mentioned that. There's a lot of extra information that you get from this level of obsessiveness.